sometimes life knocks the edge off us, gets us to settle in and coast, and that becomes perhaps the most dangerous place when we stop taking steps, stop taking risks, hold back, settle for safety. And God never promised us a safe life. I promised he'd be with us through all of it, every step of the way. To me, when I've taken risks, when I've been willing to step out, that's when I feel myself come alive again.
We've got round 3. So Tim Bohlke coming round 3 to the podcast. Welcome back.
Yeah, I love being back. This is awesome.
Well, I think I had you twice in a row in the same year. About 4 years ago, we had you on twice that year on a few different themes around rhythms we talked about. We talked about the theme of self-control. We did a series on the fruits of the spirit. You helped us wrap up that series. But that was episode 81, I think. We'll link it in the show notes. That was a long time ago because we're on episode 312 or something crazy like that. I actually don't know exactly what number this will be. But grateful for you, Tim. Michelle and I got to spend some time with you at a 15-year celebration for the ministry, Harbor Ministries, that you lead. And that was a gift, getting to spend those 4 days with you and the team out in Colorado. So thank you for inviting us for that.
Oh, man, glad you were there. And I can't believe it's been that long since I've been on with you.
Well, because we talk a lot, we share a lot of meals together and adventures together, but yeah, it has been. I mean, the time does fly.
Yep.
And I thought we would start today, kind of set up today's conversation with a story. And this happened, boy, I can't even remember if it was, I think it was 3 years ago, the East Troublesome forest fire that ravaged through Colorado, one of the biggest forest fires. I was in Colorado at an event in Hot Sulphur Springs. And I actually tried to drive up through Winter Park to that event on a Thursday. And they told me it was clear, drove up through Winter Park, north towards Granby, and the wall of smoke was just wild. And then, of course, I think the National Guard is who turned me around and said, no, you can't come through here. So they sent me, it was a 3-hour detour, because Hot Sulphur Springs was in the clear, barely. We could see the fire burning from there, but I had to drive. I was 3 hours late to the event I was going to. And I spent the next 3 or 4 days watching, we were able to have our event watching this, the ridge burning on the other side. And at that same moment, and then of course, you'll tell it in a moment what happened that final day that saved everything, the what God sent. But you were on the other side of the ridge with a group of men down in Estes Park. Would you tell the story from your side of the ridge, and I'll wrap it up from what happened on my side of the ridge for that wildfire?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, that was the fall of 2020, so the world fully disrupted in all our lives as well, one way or another. And boy, that being in that midst in that moment just accelerated the uncertainty of those days, and I mean, it just seemed so dark. But we had a gathering of men that were coming into Estes Park that really needed to be there, pastors and some business leaders, but guys that really been under the gun through the months of 2020 and all that was going on with COVID. And so we needed to be there. I needed to be there too. And so we had a gathering 10 or 12 guys that were coming in to a lodge that we had bought the previous year, the Blue Spruce Manor up there, and a big fundraising effort for us. So, but what I remember similarly was that wall of smoke. We're driving in from Nebraska, and for 2 hours, once we entered Colorado, there was this funnel cloud of smoke that followed I-76. And so we were under this cloud, very ominous, going up to Estes Park. And I'll never forget that 2-hour drive. I mean, it was just crazy. But, everything seemed to be fine in the Estes Park area. And we got up there that night, and the guy I was with, we were going to be waiting to meet the other guys in the morning. And we went to a local pub, and I remember having a drink, and the ashes, it was at night, and the ashes from the fire from somewhere had blown in and were falling in our drinks, crazy. And so that was kind of the stage set. All the guys came in the next morning, and we gathered, and the winds were starting to pick up, in Estes Park at that time. But we went ahead and went on a hike, and then one of the guys got a text on that hike saying, "Hey, there's been a voluntary evacuation requested for people in West Estes Park," which were in West Estes Park, right by the YMCA camp. And so we decided to head back, check it out. Got probably within 10 minutes, we got back to the house that our ministry owned, and there was fire engines on that street and people throwing stuff in their car. And they said it's been changed to a mandatory evacuation. And I mean, it was crazy. So there was actually a loudspeaker coming from the fire engine saying, "Don't grab your personal things, get in your cars and leave." So that kind of urgency and chaos. So we did, and I kind of said my goodbyes to the place, uh, thinking a lot of things at that moment. But that this place that we had just worked so hard to acquire probably was gone. We're worried, a question, for the sake of Estes Park and everybody there that had that. And so we joined this massive evacuation out of Estes Park, and it was like being in a scene of a disaster movie.
Well, in
In
that,
Estes, there's three. I was going to say there's three major roads that kind of collide, and then so everybody was going into this funnel to get out of town, and so we were just on a slow bumper to bumper crawl through the town of Estes Park and trying to move our way out east.
so you're crawling through town, ash is raining down. It's, the desperation,
Yep,
but you can't go fast. But you have to keep moving, and panic. I'm sure.
correct.
When this the level, the panic that I felt when the National Guard, they turned me around, like same thing of like, this is not where I want to be right now. Is in this proximity to that
Yes,
power. But there's so many parallels, and we're gonna dive into the story because there's so many parallels between the dad life that all of us are living, especially the last 3-4 years, the dad life and what culture, what the world has thrown. But there was a
yeah,
sighting, a moment that kind of brought you that I know you haven't been able to forget. There's something that you saw on the way out of town. Would
yeah,
you explain kind of that moment?
yeah, sure would. Yeah, so we were, in the midst of that congestion, and it was probably 2 in the afternoon, but skies were dark red. I mean, you could smell smoke, and as you said, ashes blowing through, and just a totally surreal scene. And so we are going very slowly. There's three cars that are with my group, and I'm driving, and I look over in the midst of all this chaos, and Big Thompson River over there as it moves its way out of town, and there's a guy fly fishing in the river, as calm as day. I mean, incredible. I mean, it was just like, it's like, am I seeing that right? And I'm looking over there, and we're going real slow, so I just stare, and just unreal scenes. Like he was just in rhythm, fishing, and it was there for a long time because we're going. I mean, I don't know how long he stayed, but I mean, watching him for a very long time, and I think my first thought was he's crazy. I mean, what does he? Is he totally oblivious to the? Not. I mean, we're talking 100 yards away, so it's not like he's remote, not knowing what's going on. But then my next thought was, whatever he's got, I need that. I want that because he has calmness in the midst of the storm. And then that imagery started to become really strong for me. I mean, that's exactly what he has. There was a calmness and a rhythm and a steadiness to what he was doing. Whether you think he should have been doing that or not became irrelevant. There was that in the midst of this chaos and total disruption around him. And as we kind of creeped by him, I just sensed for me, God say, that was your dream for launching Harbor Ministry and for bringing leaders, dads and their families, leaders of ministries, leaders organizations in, so that they could kind of find that kind of strength, stability, etc., in the midst of a storm that we all face one time or another, and really got that strong impression. That's what you created Harbor to be. That's what you want it to be. That's what you need to be about over these next years of your ministry and life.
And so I've had a chance, and Tim, this is because of your gracious invitation 3 years ago. I had a chance to go through one of your cohorts, a rogue group of 2 trips, along with kind of ongoing some mentorship coaching throughout the year. So it was about like a year and a half journey for me, and that alone, in the micro storms, in the macro storms, if I could be a dad that could be steady, calm,
Yep.
uh, versus panicking and riding the emotions up and down and stressed and checking my phone 100 times a minute for updates. Like that's my feeling if I was in the car with you guys is that is like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? You're also the leader of this
Yeah.
group. So you're responsible for the group. Like the heart, I can just kind of picture, I can almost feel what you would be feeling in that moment. And not only you're caring for that group of 20 that you're with or 12, but you also have just taken a huge step to buy a lodge for the future of the ministry, this huge
Yeah.
and that's where the fire is mostly coming towards is right towards the blue spruce. So yeah, the
Correct.
steadiness is what and I'm going to take us just from that side of the ridge over to hot sulfur springs. In this same moment, what I was experiencing was I turned in my phone, shut off my phone to be a part of this event that was happening. And
Yeah.
and when I turned my phone back on Sunday morning, there was 8 inches of fresh powder that had fallen, and the
Yeah.
visual of a burning fire to snow, and I wasn't prepared for snow. It was like September. It was like early in the season. I was like, "What? It doesn't snow in
Yep.
Minnesota that early." And here's what my
Yep.
phone chimed through to tell me, and this is a pretty powerful metaphor, I think. I learned that my grandpa had passed away while my phone was turned off, and we
Hmm.
were expecting that he was going to head home to heaven. But the whiteness and the beauty and the smoke, like the fires have died, and there's this white snow covering the mountains. Was how I exited the mountains and headed back to Minnesota. And you on the other side of the ridge, that snow saved the town. Is that correct? Or
Yeah.
was partially what
Yeah,
happened?
it is. I didn't know that story, by the way, of your grandfather during that time. So that adds some to it for sure. Yep.
Mm,
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things God used, as you mentioned, the blue spruce for me in my world as I exited. That was one of the many things I was thinking of is have I made a decision that's train wrecked the organization? It was a
yeah.
$2 million property. We were a million plus in debt still with that property as I was leaving. And I'm on the phone to the insurance agent saying, do we have enough insurance? And we don't, and we're in trouble. And I'm thinking, I've made some decisions that are really going to take the ministry down in addition to everything else. So, but yeah, we exited, got out to Fort Collins and just tried to get the best I could of giving that over to God. But that image of that fly fisherman
Mhm.
really helped me settle in. And yes, I mean, one of the two things I think God used the courage of the relentless firefighters that drew a line, west of Estes Park, and then that miraculous snow. That it was 8-10 inches of snow that neutralized that fire and stopped it. From entering Estes Park. There was a lot of other areas that got tremendous loss, but in that area, those are the two things that happened. It was fairly miraculous.
Yeah. I'm going to just take this a little further. Another Colorado story and another kind of, I think the imagery is rich here. So, harbor ministries exist to take leaders from a place of the raging seas, come into a harbor to get strengthened, retrofit, equipped, the supplies like a ship needs before you go back out. You don't stay in the harbor, right? And so that's kind of the
Yeah,
imagery
correct.
around the ministry. Anything you'd add to that imagery before I
Yep.
tell you where I'm going?
No, that's very strong. That is the imagery that people that have strength, weightiness, the difference making leaders have figured out that idea of harbor as it connects to mission. And
Yes.
no matter how critical your mission is, you got to have time in the harbor to resource, restore, and get yourself ready.
And for me, that time in the harbor, those 2 trips with a group of 20 men, so you've just committed for these 15 years, it's 20, and now there's women's groups Revel as well, 20 at a
Yep.
time, which makes no sense in the Google spreadsheet. It makes no
Yep.
sense for the budget and the
No, it does
ministry,
not.
but it works because it's a God idea, and it's gone time and time. Is it close to 50 cohorts now? Am I close?
50 groups.
Groups, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
thought
The different phases, close to that.
I
Yep.
thought so. Oh, so that's like
Yep.
800 like have been apart. So it's crazy. So it's
Correct. Yep.
so you told another story, and a story in the book Stay Wild that we're going to talk about a little bit during today's conversation, about a friend who did a 486-mile hike, the Colorado Trail. So I thought I'd take us into another Colorado story. That hike,
Yeah,
you explained that the three things that can take you out, and we want to be introspective, all of us dads. What are the things that could take us out? Because if we get taken out, our kids, our marriages, our work, our friends, everyone suffers if the dad gets taken out, if the man, if the person who's listening, if you
yeah,
get taken out, a lot of other people suffer. It's not just you. So the three things for this hiker that did this 36-day, this friend of yours, that could take him out
yeah.
was weather, isolation, and weight. I think were the three things. And I'd like to
Correct.
talk a little
Yep.
bit about specifically about weight. Could you explain how important weight and calculating the weight of what he carried was?
Yeah, I mean, kind of it's in the illustration of that conversation. It was 400 and some miles, did in 36 days. In the midst of that hike, 89,000 feet of vertical gain. Through that hike, goes basically south of Denver, dumps out near Durango. So incredible deal and accomplishment for anyone. But this man I was aware of, that's what he locked into, the three things you mentioned, and the weight being the key dynamic. And for him, he was, as I heard him, meticulous about this idea of weight, that the cumulative effect of carrying too much weight is what would break him down physically, mentally, otherwise. And so he was including his own weight. He got himself in shape, I think, and got himself to a place where his weight was right. But then what he carried with him as well, I mean, probably true to his personality of somebody that could finish this thing. I think one thing I remember him, or that was communicated to me, he did was he actually cut off part of his toothbrush, like half the toothbrush. I don't know what that weighs, but not very much. But I mean, he was meticulous to the fraction of an ounce of
Hmm.
anything that he didn't need to take with him, that he would eliminate and not take with him, because again, he knew that cumulative effect of carrying too much weight in that pack would prohibit him from finishing that journey well.
And the reason I love that story is weight, the Hebrews 12, 1 and 2, these verses
Yeah,
about like casting off the sin that entangles, the weight, like we have to cast so that we can run with perseverance this race marked out with us. We could fix our eyes on Jesus. Like, I just think back to the story of the fly fisherman, that the visual to me is he was not weighty. The experience was not experiencing the weight of that forest fire. He's
yeah,
experiencing like a lightness and a freedom and a steadiness. And as a dad, I just know that there are areas that I am carrying weight forward, past hurts, past frustrations, past failures, current struggles. Like the weights just keep adding from all the spheres. And
yeah,
that's something I really
yeah,
appreciate about you, Tim, and about Harbor Ministries is through putting us with the right group of people. So it's the friends you're with, and through silence, some time alone, some time with friends, some testimony, some goal setting, some introspective, like some worship, some music, some great food. I mean, this recipe of experience really helped me come away with less weight and actually shed some
mhm,
weight. So the
yeah,
goal is that I can actually bring my full heart to my family and for the long haul versus the short term. And
yeah,
that's where the analogy goes into back to a ship. You retrofit, but you also are strategic with what you put on a ship before you head out to sea. And if storms come, you
yeah.
actually have to get rid of cargo sometimes to make it through a storm. so so with those
Right.
kind of like double
Yep.
analogy of the hike analogy and the symbolism of the ship, how would you encourage all the dads listening that feel it? They're like, I definitely have some weight that I need to shed so I don't bring
Yeah.
harm and hurt to my family.
Well, I think, getting yourself in a place to really ask that question, look at that. I mean, that Hebrews 12 passage you referenced, just keep, if you slow read those first three
Mm,
verses, I think it'll take you on a journey of what you need to do, and one of the things I think so many people look at that passage and always talk about, because one of the translations talks about release everything, that every encumbrance and the sin that so easily entangles. So we tend to look at it as, which is certainly something to look at, is there things that are entangling you, habit, strength, sin, whatever. that are creating too much weight that are not allowing you to finish. But it's not just talking about that. It's also saying, you need to let go of
Mm.
everything that entangles you, not just then there can be many good things that weigh us down, many great opportunities. I know you and I, Jeff, I mean, in ministries we have a lot of opportunities, a lot of relationships we could lean into, a lot of places to go. Incredible opportunity, but you can take too much on of a good thing. We all know that too.
Mhm.
And so to me, that passage really looks at both. And I think as a dad and a family man, say, okay, what do I really need to take back to that hiker illustration? Only the absolute essentials. And what I've found as I've gotten older, like no excess spiritual fat is what the Message translation says on that. Don't take any excess spiritual fat. So so what I've found as I've gotten older is the things I used to care about, debate people on, wrestle with on some theology issues or whatever. Heck, I'm not even sure. I'm for sure not as sure now as I was then. I'm certain of less. Only take the absolute essentials of things that really matter and with you, because otherwise you just get bogged down, weighed down. The disagreements, the arguments we see today over so many things are
Yeah.
taking us off, and taking us off our center. And so I think, man, it couldn't be more critical for dads and leaders today to say only the essentials. And I
Yeah.
think so. I think slow walking through those verses really helps. Getting yourself in quiet places where you can really evaluate, giving some people some permission to speak into you and say, "Do you see anything I'm carrying that I should let go of?" And that's risky, but inviting some others into that could be
Yeah.
really helpful too.
Yeah. So those three areas again were weather, which we kind of talked about weather a little bit with the storm analogy and the ship analogy.
Yeah,
Weather, which I'm sure there's more aspects to talk about that, but then there's the weight um, that we just
yep,
talked about, and then the third was isolation. Was that the third kind of topic that could
yeah,
take you out? Is
yeah.
isolation? Yeah, loneliness. There we
Loneliness,
go.
isolation. Right. As I process that, I do still give people I really trust, not an invitation into my story, what I'm thinking. Doesn't mean that I still maybe won't take the step I feel God leading me to do, but there is few core people that I want to really be vulnerable with and give them permission to speak into that. Do you see something off on this or different or wrong, and kind of invite that in. That's not usually a wide audience.
Yeah.
So I'm not asking for that input from lots of people, honestly, but a few core. And like I said, that just checks and balances, and it can affirm or at least confirm, make sure I'm thinking through all those dynamics, well. So I
Mm.
mean, that's the first thing that comes to mind. And then taking some time to, sometimes we got to move and act quick for what those things are. And leadership, we know this is there is an aspect of loneliness to the leadership journey for sure, and leading different things and his family that you can't escape. That's part of it. But if we isolate too much, and part of my story of leading large organizations in the past has been one of the loneliest times I had was when I was in the midst of a very large organization with a lot of people around me, but I isolated myself off, um, stopped asking for input, stopped giving people permission to be honest with me and things they were seeing. And that's when I got to a dangerous spot and nearly made mistakes in my leadership journey. So you can be lonely in the midst of a lot of people, as well. And there's ways to kind of navigate that, figure that out, invite others in. But there also is this aspect of leadership where sometimes you do got to take the step, and that can feel alone at times in those moments for sure.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the different tools that I've learned from you, and one of them is this monthly day of space of looking back
Yeah,
30 days, forward 30 days, getting as quiet as possible. Often it's not fully a silent day. Sometimes it's a long bike ride. Sometimes it is sitting at a coffee shop with noise all around me, but I'm kind of like I'm focused in and trying to hear the voice of God. But these days of hearing from God is a tool, but then you also, I mean, the tool of encouraging brotherhood like you just did and saying, man, you got to have some people coming around you and speaking in. But then sometimes there are those two aren't always congruent. The direction felt, the leadership felt, and that's, I think, what I'm trying to get after. Even one more round of asking, like, how,
Yeah.
if you're trying to know the voice of God, you're trying to discern. There's a process with, if you're married, your wife, and discerning, as a family, you're discerning, friends discerning, but then there is that moment of like, I'm trying to like hear and listen to what's God's best for this next step. How would,
Yeah.
what if there's a opposing, like, or not opposing, but just doesn't feel like the same nudges in both areas?
Boy, I mean, that's, and I think for me, in the steps and even in the launch of this ministry, I would say there was very few people that affirmed the direction that we were going. They thought it was unwise, unsustainable. You mentioned some of that for this invitation to just 20 at a time. There was a moment, but I will say I weighed all that. People said it was unsustainable, not you couldn't, or unsustainable, that you couldn't afford to do this, couldn't raise the money to do it. Just 20 at a time makes no sense. But I did believe that there would be a moment when the cumulative impact of working at 20 at a time could be world changing. And I think we're there now. We're seeing that. But didn't get a lot of input or support from those close to me, as you mentioned that, including my wife, who was pretty hesitant at the time. And at one point, she did get on board, but it took a while. So I would say that idea of space, of solitude, of quiet was critical. So I didn't close off other voices, listen to them, process it. But in the midst of what I was sensing, feeling, hearing, the strength and the courage to take the step still came from a very sustained practice of quieting down, solitude, really seeking God on what I was sensing and the direction I was feeling. And over a period of time, that direction just was affirmed. I know I need to take this step. So there was value in what input people were given to me, but I say over the course of time and that extended time of space, of solitude, of quiet, that extended time of really listening to God, just confirm this is an idea I've given you. You do need to take that step.
Yeah.
And it's going to be pretty darn lonely at the start. And it was.
Yeah. And this maybe is where we jump into some specific themes from the two kind of, I call it like a launch pad, like the book that you launched it this week, actually 2 days ago. You launched Stay Wild, this new book, Tim, which I'm thrilled, and thanks for giving
Yeah.
Michelle and I an early copy of it. But the idea that we stay in steadiness, we already talked about, and there's a staying power. Men who just long faithfulness or obedience in the same direction. I can't remember who it's quoted
Yeah.
that. Like, I mean, it's
Yeah.
massive. Like, can we just be those guys who
Eugene,
stay? Eugene Peterson, was it? Yeah, thank you.
Eugene
uh,
Peterson. Yep.
yep. Was it long faithfulness in the same direction or long obedience in the same direction? Which one is it?
Long obedience. Yeah. Long obedience, I believe. Yeah.
See,
A long obedience in the same direction.
yeah, we're a good team. Thank you.
Yeah.
So there's that side, but then there's the stay wild, and it's we need a generation of dads who live leaning in and live with this wild, like, I'm gonna take that hill. I'm gonna move past what people think are possible. Like, we need more catalysts for amazing change like that. So I want to start though on the first side, and of course I'll let you explain.
Yep.
I'm not gonna do all the putting your words in my mouth. Like, the
No, that's
remembrance
great.
though. Remembrance is so key for the stay power that we talked about. Like remembrance, and you wrote the key to being aware and alert of what God is doing today is remembering what he has done in the past. This is part of those
Yep.
days of space, days of quiet, days of journaling, reflection. We look back. We got to look back so we can be aware of what he's doing today. Would you explain a little bit
Yep.
your heart for remembrance and this taking time to look back?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, such a powerful concept. And I think a lot of it centers around Psalm 77. And your listeners got time, go read that psalm. The first part's desperate, struggling, questioning, why is evil advancing? Why am I so isolated? Why am I so lonely? Uh, all the hard questions. In fact, one of the verses says, God, you've left me right when I needed you. I think that's about verse 9 or 10 in Psalm 77. Right when I needed you most, you've left. Then the whole Psalms turns on verse 11. It says, but then I remember the deeds of old. Then I remember what God has done. And when he changes that and those verses that follow that, the whole narrative of that psalm changes out of remembering what God has done, out of remembering the ancient wonders, not only in his own life then, but what God's done in others' lives, remembering the stories, everything changes. And so I think when we remember, what God's done, that's one of the values of quieting down and seeking solitude and the kind of things we talk about. It's that only then do you take the time and find the time to really process and remember the ways God showed up in our story. That's what brings strength.
Yeah.
And that what brings courage and reminds us God is a God of promises, that he does show up, and he will, not only then, but going forward as well.
Yep. Yep. You referenced a few times the book Comfort Crisis. I think it comes up maybe 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
And this concept that like seeking comfort, seeking safety. I mean, there's so many negatives. It's actually so super, it's bad for us to live kind of at a
Yeah.
plateau in a comfort area. Without I had a couple quotes, but I won't read them now. Just could you riff on a little bit like the concept of going for safety or going for comfort and what it leads to?
Yeah. I mean, I think it cause us to settle in and coast.
Mhm.
And I think that was that author's illustration many times throughout that it's actually a crisis in this country, that we've allowed ourselves to be comfortable. And I think in the Christian life, like I've been a Christian a long time. I know you've been around, I'm not sure where your journey started, Jeff, or
Mhm.
maybe in many aspects through your whole life. But sometimes life knocks the edge off us. I mean, and it gets us to settle in and coast. And that becomes perhaps the most dangerous place when we stop taking steps, stop taking risks, hold back, settle for safety and all that. And I mean, God never promised us a safe life. I mean, I promised he'd be with us through all of it, every step of the way. But to me, when I've taken risks, when I've been willing to step out, that's when I feel myself come alive again. And boy, it gets easy to just become more comfortable, like I said, settle in and just coast. And we've seen people do that again and again, and we lose the ability to be dangerous in our pursuit of God. And I kind of like in the comment when we're taking risks, when we're stepping out, when we're responding to God's invitation to enter this mysterious wild pursuit of him, that's when we become dangerous to an enemy.
Mhm.
And that we need to recover that kind of dangerous pursuit of God, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense, and it's not only like taking ground against the enemy and out there, but we've got these little ones. Most of the guys listening have these little kids at home that are watching dad.
Yep.
And you shared a great
Yeah.
just kind of a setup analogy from this old movie from 1985, Breakfast Club. And you kind of set it up
Yeah.
this group of teenagers talking at detention about their parents, and this quote kind of got me. Is like they're talking about their parents. The dad is someone who just goes through the motions, has settled, has lost passion. And she said, when you grow up, your heart dies. Like that was her impression of watching dad. Did I get that
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, explain a little bit more on that, like that idea of just grown-ups' hearts are dead.
Yeah. I mean, I think just the layers of things that can happen to us, the pressures, the weights, kind of swings back to that Hebrews 12 passage we just talked about. That I mean, as the years go on and the responsibilities, and I think to many of your listeners, and understandable responsibility, there's a lot to process, make a living, take care of people with the kids, and they're watching us, and all that can, really add up. But I think, being able to look at that, center ourselves around really important and not lose heart in the midst of it. So one of the keys I think is I'm thinking about this as you're asking is how do we keep our hearts fresh, alive? How do we keep our tanks full so that we're in the best place to live a full life ourselves? Because we're not going to be able to pass it on to our kids if we're, not there ourselves in terms of a fresh life. So what's it take to really energize you, your passion? I liken it to, okay, what are some of the things I love, and give yourself permission to pursue that, chase it, you know, freely, and things that kind of fill your tank so you can be operating from a full tank when you're working with your kids and going through the journey with them.
Yes, and Tim, not just like once in a while go be a part of that thing. So if you call it a hobby or you call it like, well, without doing damage to my kids, I can golf once a month or this or that. Like there's an
Yeah,
approach to it's just filling some more time with something you enjoy, but you're talking about looking a little deeper and you even use three categories. I pulled a quote here that it's the people, the places, the experiences that bring life
yep,
and that bring the
yep.
shine back into our eyes that like if we don't figure that out who are one of the people places and experiences daily monthly weekly like rhythms of getting with those people having those experiences. I know for you it's mountain biking, let's go, or kayaking like that you figured out.
Yep.
But then it's like it's the people, it's the play, there's special places, there's places, and you use the phrase though instead of just like go make time for that. You said no, you need to fight for it. You need to chase. See, fight for and chase are very common in your writing and your speaking in every breakfast conversation we've had, Tim. It's like, no, we have to be
Yep.
men who fight for these things that bring us life, who chase the people, chase the experiences. It's just a different, it's a very different setup in how I think about
Hmm.
pursuit. Like you just have this like there's an urgency in the way you talk about it. Could you kind of explain more why you use
Yep.
those terms, chase or fight for?
Yeah. I think let's take, for example, the idea we've talked about a couple times here of space, of solitude, of quiet.
Mhm.
That I think men of strength, men whose tanks are full, who are leading their families well, have a practice of solitude, space, and quiet. Now, we know that's not easy to do. But my sense when I'm talking to people is to find time for that, to make time for that. I mean, it is a fight in our schedules, and we often feel guilty for it too. I mean, that could be with family time. My wife might need me for sure, or there's a lot of other things I could be doing. Well, you have to determine, is that important or not? Now, I think people that can really show up well for their wives or really show up well for their kids, they need this quiet solitude. They need to find it. And that can become an excuse too, like, okay, I'm out for the, for sure. So understanding that, but they need to have that. I think their kids need them to take it. Their wives need them to take it. Their places of work, influence, need men that are seeking God in the quiet, because that's what will create that steadiness. But that is something you have to fight for in your schedule. Absolutely have an intentional, fierce commitment. Say, I'm going to work that into my schedule. If
Yeah.
there's something I know is going to help really strengthen me, then I better be doing what it takes to find that. So I'm in the best place I can be for them.
Yeah. And if we haven't removed the non-essential, if we haven't taken things out of our schedule, then we can try to fight for or like pursue the people, these places, these moments. But we need to already have kind of that weight side taken care of that we talked about earlier, or else we're not going to have a
Yeah.
chance.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
Tim, I don't think I've ever
Yeah,
shared
for
this with
sure.
you before, and it came out in my just I finished your book just last night, so I was just like, this is a great having this call scheduled. It was a great reason to get through the last part of your book, which I'm so grateful for. This new project, Stay Wild. But I
Yeah.
created about 10 years ago a kind of a personal. It's a mission vision statement for my life. And I've never shared this with you and I've never shared it on the podcast, but it aligns it revealed to me when I started thinking about it. This is why I've been drawn to you as a leader and the ministry Harbor Ministries is because you guys exist for this mission. But I had it, I had this maybe 7 years before we met. The
Huh.
statement is the statement that God gave me is inspire, and empower leaders to discover and take courageous leaps towards their dreams. So I'll read it
Hmm.
one more time. So I get to be a part of this is what God's called me to do is inspire and empower leaders, or you could replace it dads because dads are leaders, right? Inspire, empower
Yep.
leaders to discover and take courageous leaps towards their dreams. This idea of taking leaps, like
It's
it's
awesome, man.
it's well, it's awesome, but it's not comfortable and it's risky
No,
and
it's
it
not.
and
Yep.
that's what I dream about. I dream about this. I pray for this, that I could be a part of doing this. And this is what you do, Tim. You've done this for me. You've helped me discover and take
Mm.
courageous leaps towards my dreams. I pray that even today's conversation, in a fraction of a small way, is helping the guys listening discover a little more and take a courageous leap towards a dream God has. Because people moving towards a dream, dads moving towards dreams, it changes everything, our pace and our urgency and our passion, and people moving towards settling. It's not the same. We
Yeah.
don't move the same way. We don't lead the same way. We don't pray the same way. So how would you just kind of reflect back to me what you heard from my kind of vision, mission, and why this is all so important?
Well, man, I mean, one, that's pretty cool to hear for starters, and talk about alignment, you know. So, and I think when I hear, I mean, one of the things that comes to mind is kind of circling back to, okay, if for you to be able to do that, you're going to need to be operating from a place of strength and fullness for you to be able to give that to others. If our, you know, my reservoir is empty, I'm sure they're not going to be able to help others get there, or it won't be authentic. Eventually it'll break down, you know. So that's the first thing here. So you answering that for yourself as well, you know, and others listening. Okay, what is it really going to take, you know? And kind of per our conversation, I think it's going to take a great memory, remembering the God showed up, remembering, you know, you coming back to that mission now, no doubt about it. And so taking it, having a great memory, really looking at that Hebrews 12 passage and what are some things I need to lighten up, you know, to do this thing well, and then really seeking God in those moments of solitude and quiet and space, so that we're really hearing from Him and operating from a place of strength.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where my mind goes when I hear you say that. That'll be critical for you going forward. It has been for me in leading us, and
Mhm.
you know, the times I haven't been operating from that, I've had to figure that out. Last year, it was actually right when I came out to see you, Jeff, and you gathered a few guys together last fall in the midst of a crazy busy stretch. But one of the things I got a chance to do, which I shouldn't have, in one way, it wouldn't make sense to add this in, but was Marcus Mumford. I'm kind of a fan of Mumford and Sons, and he was doing a solo concert in Boulder, and it was right before a trip I was going to do with you. It's like, you don't get time for that, but I love music. That's one of the things that fills me, and I love their music. And so I invited my son, and we road tripped out to Boulder, and went to this concert. He was doing a solo concert right in front of the stage. I mean, he's singing "Awake My Soul," "You Were Made to Meet Your Maker," you know, and hearing him solo sing that, it was quite a moment. And I came back from that trip. I got to fly fish with Dylan, got to go to that concert, got to hear him. Came back, and man, my tank was full. Then I was able to get out, be with you guys in a different place. And so
Yeah.
that's what I mean by fighting for. It's like it didn't make any sense to make that road trip at that moment on the surface. But sometimes that can busy us up, but sometimes it's exactly what we need. Just got to be able to discern that.
I'm so glad you brought this up, Tim, because you shared 4.5 years ago with me. You give the advice you said there's a power in combining intentional conversations and fun memory making trips. You're talking about moments with your
Yeah.
son, just like that. You said there's a power in combining those two things. And then later in that conversation, you said, and you need to actually, to create significant memories, you need to invest resources, time, and intentionality. So just it's fun because without even like asking to do a little
Yeah.
check in, hey, are you doing what you encouraged us to do? You did
Hmm.
it
Yeah.
in that
Just
moment.
shared it. Yeah. And,
Yes.
you know, I think I mean, that's critically important no matter how old. That son I was talking about was 28 when we did that trip. But so as an older man, young man now, um, as important as it was when he was 14, when I was still trying to do that stuff too. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, Tim, I wanted to thank you. The work that you've poured into, and I know this is like your third or fourth book project, but Stay Wild. We'll link it in all of our show notes and on our social media. And just so grateful for you saying, here's another offering of taking what God's been doing in you for decades into book form. And
Yep.
the chapters are like 2 to 3 pages long, which is perfect for us dads. These
Yep.
short, like
Yep.
read
Yes.
it and deploy, and you can take this and make it actionable in the dad life for your families, for your
Yep.
mission. I wanted to end with this quote before I ask you to pray over us. And this is, let me see if I can scroll back and find it. This has been shared at, I think, all the gatherings when we've been together. And we don't know who the author is, which is a bummer. We don't know who the author is, but it says this, and I can visualize this like on a sign before like a serious, like a gnarly adventure. You read this. The cowards never started. The weak died along the way. Only the strong survived. They were the pioneers. Tim, I see you, and I know that you have been a pioneer in this chapter of 3+ years that I've known you, and you've inspired me to live as a pioneer. So I wanted to say thank you. And then I wanted to invite you to pray for that pioneering spirit, that courage, the staying wild type of fire to burn within us so that we could live this way and survive strong. So only the strong survive. They were the pioneers. We need pioneer dads to pioneer faith
Yep.
and legacy and to make it the long haul and not all these statistics of divorce and dads that walk away from their kids. So would you pray kind of that strong pioneering spirit over all of us?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely would. And before I do, I was just going to mention too, I just talked with a dad that's a pastor down in Durango, and what he did with the Stay Wild book was read it through chapter at a time with his daughter, and they would talk about it, kind of a chapter, a couple chapters a week kind of deal, and she loved it. So it might be practical enough to
Yeah.
do that for the dads that are listening out there that way.
Love that.
Yep.
Love that.
So, all right, let me pray. Lord, thanks for this time and be able to connect with Jeff. And I just pray for those listening. I pray this for myself, that we will have a renewed commitment to wildly pursue you. That your invitation to us is to enter into this mysterious adventure, which is the essence of the faith journey, and it ought to continue into this mysterious adventure with you. And so I pray that you'll give us the fire and the passion and the commitment and the ideas and the resources and the time to seek you well, to seek you wildly, to pursue you all in, that you'll help us not to settle, not to coast, but to continue to be able to take steps of faith that you put on our hearts and on our lives. And so just commit this time to you. Thank for the many that are listening to this. Will again be inspired with courage and strength and steadiness to seek you and to be able to show up in the ways we need to and can be with all those areas of people that depend on us. So, love you. Amen.